started after World War II in 1947 and lasted until 1991. It was an ideological battle between America and the Soviet Union. It was called the Cold War because there was no large-scale fighting between the two superpowers, but it was still very intense and dangerous. The United States wanted to stop the spread of communism. The Soviet Union wanted to spread communism, so they went head-to-head all over the world. Let's take a look at this map. You see all those red spots? Those are communist countries. The yellow spots are countries that were not communist but were influenced by the Soviet Union. The green ones are countries that were not communist and were not influenced by the Soviet Union. And the purple ones are countries that were former enemies of the US who became allies during World War II. Many of them were communist or becoming communists. The United States felt threatened by all these communist countries surrounding it. That meant there was going to be a lot of fighting. Not direct fighting, but indirect fighting. Like, for example, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. We'll talk about that more in future episodes. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss those. The Cold War was also an ideological battle between capitalism and democracy on one side and communism on the other. The United States championed democracy and capitalism. Soviet Union championed communism. They thought their way of government was the best way for all countries. So they tried to convert everyone else's countries into communist countries. Another example of this was the Berlin Wall. In 1961, the communist government of East Germany built a wall to keep its people from fleeing to the democratic West. It was a sad and depressing symbol of the Cold War. On the other side of the wall, people could walk freely, talk freely, and choose their leaders freely. On the east side of the wall, people's lives were controlled by an oppressive government. They couldn't travel, they couldn't speak out against the government, and they had no say in who their leaders were. One day, President Kennedy challenged the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev to tear down the wall. Here's what he said. "I believe that wall is a symbol of what this whole generation has been about. I don't want to tear down your wall. I want to tear down my wall. There is no reason for this wall to be here anymore." Fortunately, it would be another 28 years before the Berlin Wall came down. Another major event during the Cold War was the Cuban Missile Crisis. In 1959, Fidel Castro came to power in Cuba and set up a communist dictatorship. The United States wanted to get rid of him. The Soviet Union wanted to protect him. In October 1962, the world found out that the Soviets had placed missiles in Cuba capable of reaching the United States with nuclear weapons. This event brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. But somehow cooler heads prevailed, and the crisis was averted. The Cold War was also a race to explore space. It was called the space race. Both sides wanted to be the first to accomplish major milestones. The Soviets won some early victories. For example, they sent the first satellite into orbit. They also sent the first person into space. But the Americans came back strong and won the most important victory. In 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first human being to walk on the moon. The Cold War ended when the government of the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Mikhail Gorbachev was the last leader of the Soviet Union. He tried to reform the government, but failed. When it became clear that communism was no longer viable, he resigned. A few months later, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. The Cold War lasted for 46 years. It was the longest period of hostility between the United States and Russia. It was an expensive period for both sides. The military spending of the Cold War era led to the world being on the brink of mutually assured destruction. If it had become hot, it would have been catastrophic. But it remained cold, and after 46 years, communism finally collapsed. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it. Thanks for watching.